Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Katie and I'm a community program coordinator for the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick. And today's webinar, we're going to be talking about understanding anxiety disorders. And just a reminder that at the end of the session, before you leave, if you don't mind staying on for me to close out the session, and then afterwards, you'll be prompted to fill out a little survey just so that we can know what you're interested in, get some feedback, and learn how we can make some improvements and better support New Brunswick. So thank you for that, if you don't mind just staying on. So just a little bit about the Canadian Mental Health Association. We're a national charity that helps maintain and improve the mental health for all Canadians. So as the province-wide leader and champion for mental health, we help people access the community resources they need to build resilience and support recovery from mental illness. So there's so many different ways that we do that, and we've really adapted how we do that lately to make it so that we can support you guys locally, provincially, virtually, by doing programs, presentations, workshops, doing what we can to support New Brunswickers. So in New Brunswick, we have 18 locations provincially, with city offices in Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John. And then we have our community program coordinator role, which I'm part of. We have 14 of us all together, so kind of scattered throughout the province. We have some in each of our city offices, and then in our rural regions to support the mental health of smaller communities. So all in all, pretty much every inch of New Brunswick is covered by a CMHA employee to support those needs. And then we have our Certified Provincial Peer Support Program in our provincial office, which aims to train individuals with lived experience with mental illness so that they can share stories of their recovery to inspire hope in others who are going through similar things. And in Charlotte County, we have our employment program, Working Stronger Together. And that is a program that helps individuals with diversified disabilities find employment or help with different post-secondary education opportunities to support those needs and find different accommodations for them as well. And newly, we have a bounce back program, which we just launched this January. And the next slide has a little bit more information on that. So it's a free guided self-help program grounded in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for adults 19 plus to learn skills to better manage depression and anxiety. So there's two different forms of support: telephone coaching using skill building workbooks. And then there's the online videos, which provide practical tips at bouncebackvideo.ca. There is an access code, and this one, there's no referral needed. So something with our bounce back program, the telephone coaching, you do need that referral from a primary care provider. However, if you want to do just the online videos, you can do that with no referral. And this can be done in English and French, as our coaches are bilingual, and so is the information, and there's no traveling required. So it's a great opportunity, especially during our current circumstances. So if you want more information on that, I believe that there's our website link in the chat that you can check out. And since it's new, it's one of the first things that pops up when you check out our website. So let's get right to it. What are anxiety? What are anxiety disorders? So they involve intense, prolonged feelings of fear and distress. And it's important to note as well that one of the underlying emotions of anxiety disorders is fear, whether it's the fear of the unknown, certain phobias, which we'll explore later, or whatever it may be. Oftentimes, the difference between just regular everyday anxiety that we all experience and an anxiety disorder is that they don't appear to have an obvious cause. And these symptoms interfere with functioning in everyday life. So if you have a job interview coming up, I imagine that you will have some anxiety. That's natural. I have to do a presentation right now, a webinar. I have a little bit of anxiety. That's normal. This is public speaking. However, if you experience a significant amount of anxiety, especially on a daily basis, for no apparent cause, you can't pinpoint where it's coming from, it's just there, then that could suggest an anxiety disorder. And especially if those symptoms are interfering with your daily life. So essentially, they're beyond the individual's control. Many times we can maybe count backwards from 10, take some deep breaths, distract ourselves, and it gets a little bit better. And we can have some control over it. Whereas sometimes with an anxiety disorder, it's beyond the individual's control. Not to say that there aren't treatments, medications, and tools and skills that can help control it. That's certainly the case. It is manageable. It's just not something that we can switch on and off like a control panel. So it's different from short-term stress or anxiety responses. You've probably heard of the stress response, fight or flight, or different anxiety responses. And that is different than an anxiety disorder because those are usually situational. Excuse me. So what does anxiety look like? Well, there's the physical symptoms that we experience in our body, the racing or pounding of the heart, shortness of breath, feeling as though you're choking. We may have pain or tightness in the chest, trembling or shaking, tense, tight muscles. And I know for me, I always feel it in the back of my neck, my shoulders, sweating or hot flashes. Some people, I've heard some young folks say, I'm experiencing hot flashes. And people say, oh, you're too young for menopause. But hot flashes can actually be a symptom of anxiety. And then the common discomfort and butterflies in the stomach, that kind of uneasy, upset feeling in your tummy. And then emotionally, psychologically, what we're feeling kind of up here is nervous, frightened, scared, that stem from that fear, worrying about things and unable to stop, feeling stressed or uptight or alarmed or in danger. Because many times, anxiety, technically its function, the reason why it exists is as a protective alarm bell system in our mind, in our brain to keep us aware and alert for danger. However, nowadays, danger looks a little bit different. It might be something that looks like a social threat or an emotional threat, or maybe it's just the fear of the unknown, that not knowing what will happen that sometimes can sound those alarm bells. And other times it can be nothing that's even on our radar. We don't even realize what triggers it. And then our behavioral symptoms. So what does anxiety look like when it affects our behavior? It looks like avoidance of situations that may cause or intensify our anxiety. Isolation, withdrawal, kind of pulling into our shell because the world can be scary and it makes us feel anxious and worried, and that's just uncomfortable. Not attending an event or a commitment. So again, that avoidance. Calling in sick or work to avoid anxiety-provoking roles or duties. So for instance, if maybe I was too anxious to do this presentation, I may message my supervisor and say, I'm sorry, today I can't come in to do this webinar. I've got the stomach flu. When chances are really that stomach flu is the anxiety, physical symptoms that I'm experiencing. But luckily I'm well enough today to do the webinar. So avoiding parties or other social situations, you see a common theme here, right? Avoidance. Avoidance is one of the #1 behavioral symptoms of anxiety because we avoid what feels uncomfortable, what provokes our anxiety. So where does it come from? What causes anxiety? Why is it that some people have just everyday manageable anxiety and other individuals, it can morph into an anxiety disorder? So it can be caused by, first of all, genetic predisposition. So for instance, if my mother or my aunt or my grandmother experienced anxiety or even another mental illness, I have a higher genetic predisposition for that. Just like how I have a higher genetic predisposition for diabetes because my grandmother is diabetic and my mother's pre-diabetic. So it is hereditary and genetic. And if you have a blood relative who experiences anxiety or a mental illness, then it's just something to be aware of, that you could have a higher chance as well. And then there's situational stress. So sometimes we'll experience anxiety due to what's going on situationally. Maybe we're in a really stressful work environment. I think of also stressful situations. We're all living through a global pandemic right now. So it's natural for anxieties to be higher. However, for some people, this could trigger an anxiety disorder. Psychological stress, maybe unhealthy work environment, bullying, a lot of pressure, whatever it may be that creates that psychological stress could be a trigger as well. Traumatic experiences, and I'd like to highlight that what is traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for another person. Trauma is very individual, is very unique and individual to the person experiencing it. Lisa is my moderator today, so I'll use her as an example. Say Lisa and I, we were driving in a car together and we had an accident. And maybe for Lisa, she's been in a few car accidents. She's a little bit older than I am, and it might not be that big of a deal to her. For me, though, it's my first car accident, and I am absolutely mortified, and my anxiety is through the roof, and that will be a traumatic experience for me. Now, there could have even been someone on the sidewalk, a bystander watching the accident. Maybe they're the first one to call 911 for us. They weren't in the accident. That event did not happen to them. However, it can still be a traumatic experience for them. Trauma is so different and individual for everyone. So it's important to remember that any kind of traumatic event, regardless of what it is, can cause or trigger that anxiety or that mental illness in you. And trauma is usually something that is unexpected, sudden, and that we have no control over. And then biological changes. So whether it's biochemical, hormonal, things like that. Some examples of biochemical changes or biological changes include puberty, menopause, childbirth. Sometimes individuals might have surgery or injuries that change the biological changes of their body or the chemicals, essentially anything that can affect the chemical makeup in your brain, because mental illnesses essentially are a biochemical imbalance for some individuals, if that makes sense. So being aware that that those are things that can affect you, which is why many times we see things like an anxiety disorder emerging after teenagers or adolescents have been through puberty, because they've had those hormonal biological changes that triggered that. So what types of anxiety disorders are there? Anxiety disorders are mental illnesses, and there's several different types. And these are the ones that we're going to look at today: phobias, panic disorder, agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. So we'll start with specific phobias. These are an intense fear of something specific. So whether it be an object, an animal, or a situation, for instance, heights, dogs, spiders, enclosed spaces, those are all common ones that we've probably heard about. Individuals with phobias adapt the way that they live to avoid this specific fear. So it's more than just being afraid of something. It's an intense terror to the point that it is a phobia. It's more than just feeling a bit uneasy or anxious or scared. It is literally that paralyzing fear. And it's hard for individuals to understand and relate to if it's not something that they've experienced before. An example is that many people may feel nervous around flying, but will still fly on a plane. Whereas someone with a phobia of flying may not even go to an airport. In fact, they may even get uneasy or anxious by hearing or seeing a plane flying overhead. So it's important to realize that if somebody says, I have a specific phobia, or I'm diagnosed with a specific phobia, it's serious, and it's important to realize that these can affect relationships, school, their work, career opportunities, and daily lives. Some people will take a different route to work each day, maybe to avoid taking a bridge because they have a fear of it. Some people, will, as we said, avoidance is one of the main behaviors that we see. So their lives can get very small because they avoid so many different things of those specific fears to make their lives more comfortable. And then another anxiety disorder is panic disorder. And these involve repeated and unexpected panic attacks. So I'll start by explaining what a panic attack is. It's that feeling of intense fear or terror that lasts for a short period of time, involving physical sensations such as a racing heart, shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, shaking, sweating, or nausea. You might notice that a lot of these are similar symptoms to that of a heart attack. So some say that they feel as though they are having a heart attack, suffocating, or fear that they are dying, because common for individuals experiencing a panic attack to present themselves at the emergency room or even call an ambulance, believing that they're having a heart attack and thinking that they're dying, especially if it's one of their first experiences, because it is absolutely terrifying. And when someone says that they're having a panic attack or they've had one before, it's more than just a feeling of uneasiness. It's that extreme fear and terror, and it's very scary. So this can be a normal reaction to a stressful situation, part of another mental illness, and sometimes it can even be triggered by anything, a scent, maybe they see something that triggers it. Sometimes it's certain places. It's hard to tell what might trigger it, and it's very unique to the individual as well and their experiences and history. But panic disorder is essentially experiencing unrepeated and unexpected panic attacks. And then there's agoraphobia, which is a little similar in the fact that these individuals experience panic attacks as well. However, it's a fear of being in a situation where a person can't escape or find help if they experience a panic attack or other feeling of anxiety. It's sometimes referred to as a fear of fears, and the most common phobic anxiety disorder and the most disabling. So a person may become panic-stricken when confronted with their fears. Agoraphobia is sometimes coined as the fear of leaving the house. And there's a reason for that. These individuals many times have what they call safe spaces, places where they don't have that fear, as it is usually a place that holds that fear. For instance, if I experienced agoraphobia and I had a panic attack at, say, the movie theaters, chances are I will not be going back to the movie theaters because for me, the fear is in that place. That's where I had my panic attack. There must be something within that place. And I can't go back there again because it's scary, because I experienced something, very scary there. And so their lives can become very small, and they might only have certain places that they can go. For a lot of individuals, it might mean avoiding large groups of people as well. That could be part of the fear. And so it is often common for individuals with agoraphobia to stay in their house quite often and only have specific places that they can go where they feel safe. Social anxiety disorder is one that you may have heard of before, also known as social phobia. So according to the DSM-5, it is a marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. The individual fears that he or she will act in a way or show anxiety symptoms that will be negative evaluated. So it's that self-consciousness, that fear of what will they think? What if I mess up? What if I make a mistake? Will they all laugh at me? I'm sure that some of those thoughts are familiar to some of you. And it's something that we do see depicted in the media or in movies. And it's something that is one of the more common anxiety disorders that we do see fairly often. And we do see a lot of that avoidance, avoiding social situations, larger groups of people, not really wanting to speak up in front of others. The public speaking may be very scary for them, things like that. And so individuals with social anxiety disorder, their lives can get a little bit, the quality, it can affect the quality of their life, and their lives can get small from avoiding places, people, things that are anxiety provoking. And as I said before, with some of the other ones, it can affect, school, work, relationships, and career opportunities. And then there's generalized anxiety disorder. So this is just experiencing anxiety generally in many areas of your life. And so, apologies. So this involves feelings of intense worrying about things of which they have little or no reason to have that much concern or worry for. And oftentimes it may feel as though they're worrying all the time about everything and they have no control over it. They can't stop worrying. Sometimes they can even realize that it's silly. There's no need to worry about this, but yet they still can't stop it. And anxiety may arise that causes worrying throughout regular routines and functioning, causing significant impairment related to even daily activities. So maybe one day you're having a good day and you make a commitment on a good day, quite common. And then you're having a bad day where your anxiety's high, and you end up having to cancel because you're just not able to function and carry out those routines or commitments. And the individual may experience difficulty in managing these anxious symptoms. And it's also important to note too that it's one thing to, there's so many different symptoms. So we can get under control the stuff that's going on in our head and still not be able to control what's going on in our body physiologically. We might have stomach aches or, sweaty palms or shortness of breath. And sometimes that takes a little bit more practice to control. But it's important to remember that with practice, with learning new skills, that these things can be managed. So there are two other mental illnesses that are no longer classified as anxiety disorders. However, anxiety or fear is a major part of these illnesses. And those are obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So let's look at OCD first. It is made up of unwanted thoughts, images, or urges that cause anxiety, and these are known as obsessions. So these are the ones that are kind of happening in our head, the obsessions that we have that can be very distracting and even disturbing for us. They can cause a lot of guilt, fear, paranoia, a lot of other different feelings as well. And then there's sometimes as well what we call compulsions, which are repeated actions meant to reduce that anxiety and can oftentimes be difficult to control. So those are usually our behaviors. The compulsions are our behaviors. So maybe the obsession that I'm having in my mind, and I go like this because it reminds me of a hamster wheel, which is going and going and going, is perhaps it's a disturbing image that pops into my head. And so the compulsion or behavior I have is something that's supposed to reduce that anxiety. And I know that the classic ones that we think of, that we automatically think of, is the fear of germs and compulsively washing our hands and such. And my land, I know that during these times, I feel, I hope that those individuals who are afflicted with that are taken care of, because I can't imagine how scary these times must be for them. But it's essentially those obsessions in your mind that can be hard to control, and then those compulsions our behaviors that we do to help control that anxiety that make us feel better, yet they're difficult to control. And some of them might be ones that we know or feel are unnecessary and might even be embarrassed about, but it's compulsive, right? So it's hard to control. It's almost like second nature. We do them without even thinking. And then post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So I talked a little bit earlier about trauma and how it's unique and individual to the person experiencing it, in that the same thing can happen to all of us on this webinar, all 53 of us, and every single one of us would experience it, and it'll affect them differently because we're all so different and individual. So what is traumatic for me might be a walk in the park for you. And what's traumatic for you might be nothing for me. It just depends on who we are as individuals. And so something is traumatic when it's very frightening, when it's overwhelming and causes a lot of distress. And it's usually unexpected. We don't see it coming. PTSD involves the experience of intrusive symptoms, which would include re-experiencing the traumatic event through flashbacks or vivid nightmares. It's also important to note that these individuals do experience a lot of anxiety, that hypervigilance, being on alert, feeling as though there's danger around every corner because of that experience that they had. It's hard to relax, and I imagine that part of their physical experiences is a lot of attention in their body, and that inability to relax and just let that tension and that fear go. There's a lot of other symptoms and things when it comes to PTSD. Depression is very common. Anxiety is a big part of it. We see high correlations between PTSD and substance use because they're hurting and they just want to make that hurt stop, right? So we see it oftentimes as a way of self-medicating. However, it's important to note that there are some very beneficial therapies out there and medications that can help with PTSD, as with all mental illnesses. So, and this is also one, I know that I mentioned before, the cause of anxiety disorders. One of them was genetic predisposition. That isn't the case in this one because PTSD usually occurs when something traumatic and unexpected happens to us. So it's not one that we kind of already have and can be triggered. However, we might have things like personality traits or temperament that can make us more susceptible to developing certain illnesses. So you may be wondering who is affected. Anxiety disorders can affect people of all ages and are the most common mental health problem that we do see. Anxiety is something that many individuals experience just as part of everyday life because it's a feeling, it's an emotion. However, it can become an anxiety disorder when it becomes a little bit more than just regular manageable anxiety. And absolutely anyone can be affected from 1 to 100. And I know that's hard to imagine, but it can affect people of all ages, starting at any point in life, late in life, or even quite early in life. So if I have an anxiety disorder, what can I do? People often wonder, will I just get over it on my own? And for individuals who perhaps are experiencing situational anxiety, that may be the case. It may eventually go away on its own, or you may find certain tips or tricks that work well for you that make it manageable. However, others may need time to recognize how much anxiety affects their life. They may need to get help, such as counseling or medication. As I mentioned before, mental illnesses such as anxiety are chemical imbalances in the brain, and sometimes it takes a medication to balance that out again. Support groups. I know that CMHA has just started up a whole bunch of new support groups, educational therapeutic programs that are really beneficial. And I'm sure that there's other ones within your communities as well, or virtually. Your support networks, which as your support network is everyone in your life that is supporting you and cheering you on and wants to see you do well. So that can be anyone from healthcare practitioners to friends, family, coworkers, absolutely anyone that is supportive of you that you can go to. Self-help strategies. So these are the things that are within your toolbox that you've already developed and you know works for you. Coping strategies, skills. And of course, that's something that I hope that you are always adding to and building upon. And of course, other natural coping strategies. So we know that natural holistic approaches are becoming more and more common. So perhaps there's other strategies that help you cope, whether it's, I don't know, yoga or essential oils or whatever it may be that's beneficial for you. And that's things that you can explore as well, as long as you have different routes that you can explore to get the help that you need to feel better. So some tricks to control your anxiety. There's a breathing exercise, 4-7-8. So that breathing exercise is one where we breathe in for the count of 4, hold for the count of 7, and then exhale for the count of 8. Now, I understand that that can be a little bit uncomfortable as that's a long hold and a long exhale. If you prefer, you can do the square breathing or the box breathing that some may be familiar with. And it's just inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and then do it again. And it's easy to remember because it's like a box, 4, 4, 4. And then there's listening to music, which I know I personally find so beneficial. There is a music for every single emotion that I am feeling. I have a song, and that might mean developing a playlist that you find is really beneficial for managing your anxiety or reducing it. Practicing mindfulness, which is essentially being in the present moment with a sense of acceptance, non-judgment, and awareness of what's going on around you, being aware of your breath. And if you have thoughts, being non-judgmental and accepting of those, just letting them, I just thinking of it as a tide, letting them come and go and just noticing, not dipping your toes in the water or trying to push it away or anything like that, just noticing, being aware, okay, I had a distracting thought. That's okay. I'll get to that later. Let's go back to focusing on my breath. And there's many different ways that you can practice mindfulness. And I encourage you to learn more about that because it is very beneficial for many different aspects of wellness. And a grounding technique that is very beneficial if you're experiencing anxiety in the moment to ground you and kind of distract you, I guess, as well. It can be helpful if you're experiencing a panic attack, if you're able to practice that in the moment. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique should be practiced while you're feeling well and calm so that you can utilize it and it'll be there almost a second nature when you need it, kind of in an emergency. So I'll explain to you how that works. So you want to find 5 things. So just being, using your 5 senses, 5 things that you can see. So if I look around the room, I can see a clock, a plant, a window, just looking around, taking in your surroundings, and 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you feel, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And so if this is a grounding technique that you find beneficial for you, once you, try it out a few times and you might realize, hey, this actually really helps me. You might want to write those down as a reminder. I know I have a hard time remembering them myself, but also maybe having a little something that you can smell if there's nothing near you to smell in your purse or wallet or in the car. Something that you can pop in your mouth for a taste, whether it's, a Werther's Original or a piece of gum or a Halls, what have you, so that you have something for your senses and you're able to do this and practice this no matter where you are. And visualization. So this can be just, you hear people say, oh, go to your happy place. And That's actually visualization. So a matter of closing your eyes and just in a difficult time, don't do it when you're driving, but closing your eyes in a safe environment where you can just visualize yourself in that happy place. So for me, of course, it would be near water, because water is something that's very calming for me and brings me peace, whether it's by a bubbling brook, the ocean, hearing the crashing of the waves. And I would make sure that I get really immersed in that visualization, taking in all of my senses, getting them all involved. What do I smell? The smell of the sea salt on the waves, feeling the breeze on my face and the water against my toes and my toes sinking into the sand, letting that take over all of your senses and really becoming involved in it. And that can really help decrease your anxiety. And a good way too of preparing this ahead of time is by writing it all out if you're a writer, or perhaps you're more artistic and creative and you want to draw it out. That's another thing that you can do as well. There's also kind of guided visualization meditations that you can do as well. And then there's meditation. So that can be done in many different ways. Last night, I did a meditation that was just a 1 minute, meditation moment. And that's a good way to start, because meditation is not easy. Mindfulness is not easy. Our mind is meant to wander and have a lot of thoughts coming in. We're human beings, and having that acceptance and that patience for ourselves, and allowing ourselves some grace and being gentle that those thoughts will pop into our mind, and that's okay. Just recognizing them and bringing ourselves back to the moment is what's important. And I know that YouTube has some great meditation exercises, and there's some different apps as well out there. I know that the Calm app is one that our executive director is very fond of. And then exercise. This is one that many of you have probably heard time and time again. Exercise is like the new antidepressant. It's naturally wonderful for you mentally, physically, just all around for your wellness. And this is something that I decided that if I was going to preach it, I better start practicing it. And they're right. I can tell you from my own personal experiences, all the studies are correct. Exercise is amazing for all aspects of your life, for reducing your anxiety, for increasing positive attitude, positive thoughts, feeling good. And of course, that surge of those happy hormones, right? Those, the ones that we get going when we're experiencing physical activity. So I encourage you to find different ways that you can get active. And I have heard that for some people, physical activity can actually trigger their anxiety. And so finding different ways, maybe running isn't one for you. Maybe it's just going for a leisurely walk and just finding what it is that works best for you. And then if you've got some kids that you're working with, some ways that you can help them cope is by practicing breathing. For the little ones, something that I always say is breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower, and then breathe out through your mouth like you're blowing out a candle, because that's a good visualization that you can give to them that they can associate. Because if you say inhale for so long, hold, exhale for so long, they're not really going to understand. So giving them an image with that helps, I find. And there's lots of fun breathing exercises out there too for kids. My personal favorite is a flower breathing one. And then making a relaxation or calm box for them, something that they can pull out when they're having a hard time, or even sensory items. I've heard of sensory bins being pretty common in some schools, where young kids, they can just take a little break from what they're doing to calm down, play with some different sensory items that, have cool textures, different things, and they feel more calm and they can go back more relaxed and focused. And then listening to music or watching funny videos. I am a huge fan of the funny pet videos because animals always make me smile and laugh. And I know that little kids love animals too. So, pull out some cute bunny videos or something. And that's sure to reduce their anxiety and make them feel better. And then that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. is a wonderful one that is really good for kids too, because it's something that usually we can do just about anywhere, and it's one that they can remember. I have these Mindful Minute bookmarks that I know I printed off for my daughter that have the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique on it that she can color in, and I found those great. If you're interested in those, you can send me an email. You'll see that here at the end, and I can send that to you as well. And of course, exercise is just as beneficial for them, if not more, because they've got so much more extra energy. And it's important to note too that with anxiety comes some extra energy, that nervous energy, some of that, they might feel like they're wired or just don't know what to do with that energy. And so expelling it through exercise is a wonderful way to get rid of some of that anxious energy that they have built up in them. And then dealing with anxiety specific to COVID-19, it's important to be aware of how much time we're spending on technology. So on social media, listening to other people's opinions or seeing different memes or, different information that might not always be factual. And then limiting our time on TV and news so that we're limiting the amount of news that we're getting, because unfortunately, a lot of media and news focus on the negative. That's just how it works. And that can be hard on us, taking in all of that negativity. And honestly, it can be hard for our kids too. So being aware of how often that's on. I know for us, I just checked the government of New Brunswick site, and I try to keep it to that. I have them on my Facebook now so that if there's a mandatory update, or for instance, we went to yellow, so I got to see that, and I just check it when I hear rumors, I guess. But being aware that we're not spending too much time on that, we're not obsessing over it, because this is something that we don't have a lot of control over. So letting it be and just being aware of the information that's necessary for us and our families to be safe in our communities, and leaving it to that. And being aware of how much social media time and screen time we're having before bedtime, as that can disrupt our system a bit. And using relaxation techniques. So if you're having a hard time relaxing, say before bed, or you're having an experience where you're experiencing some anxiety, having some relaxation techniques that are beneficial that you can use, and using the adaptive skills that you've learned in the past. So I'm sure that we've all experienced anxiety or something scary or unnerving, or something where there was a big unknown that we didn't know what the outcome would be. We've all had some kind of experience at some point in our life where we've had to deal with a situation like that, I'm sure. So what has helped you in those situations? What's worked for you before that you could use now? And don't forget about those skills that have been beneficial in the past, because they can work for us again. And then staying in touch and staying connected with friends and family. The support networks that we talked about, and staying connected may look a little bit different these days, but making sure that we are making the effort for those connections, whether it's sending a letter through the mail, texting, video calling, just picking up the telephone, or getting together in a safe way in our bubbles, whatever it may look like for you, just as long as we are staying connected. Because as we have seen, an anxiety symptom can be isolation and withdrawal. And yet we're already living in isolation already enough. So that can be very difficult for people. So also reaching out too. So when it comes to helping a loved one, you're already doing something in the right direction. You're here, right? You're educating yourself about the mental illness. Having patience, because it's important to realize that they didn't ask for an anxiety disorder. They may not have the most control over it or have learned to manage it yet. And it's going to take time to learn that. So having patience and supporting them through that. However, it's also important for you to set boundaries, to maintain your own wellness and take care of yourself. Because as much as we might want to help people and be there for them, it's important that we also take care of ourselves and set some of those limits so that we're not overdoing it and pouring from an empty cup, if that makes sense. So taking some time for self-care for us, and then seeking supportive services for family and friends, and for yourself as well, if you're that individual who's supporting them. So when it comes to mental health services, there's local mental health professionals that I'm sure are in each community. There's peer support consultants, mental health mobile crisis units, which usually operate after hours. I know in my area, they're open from 2 to 10 p.m. and it's one of the clinicians just working after hours. And it's a service where they can oftentimes come and help you or give advice to family members when there's a crisis situation. And each area of the province should have one of those. There's also the local addictions and mental health centers through Horizon, mental health and addictions. And there's one of those in each of your area, and each area of the province, even rural areas. And that's free counseling. There is, however, a bit of a wait list, but that's something that is there for you for support. And if you're looking to talk to someone for support, or just, maybe you're lonely and you want to talk to somebody or had a bad day, just need to chat, there's CHIMO helpline, which is our provincial helpline. And CHIMO is actually Inuit for friendship. So it's a friend that you can call when you're in need. And that number is 1-800-667-5005. And then for young folks, there's Kids Help Phone, 1-800-668-6868, or they can text TALK to 686868. And there's somebody there to support them through what they're going through. And of course, don't forget your support network, right? Your family and friends that are there for you, who care for you, and that want to see you happy and healthy. And then you can always go to your local emergency hospital or call 911. And so if you are interested in maybe resources, handouts, information, I had mentioned the Mindfulness Minute 54321 bookmark for kids. If you're interested in that, you can send me an email, Kaitee. I spell my name a little bit differently, .mcdougall@gnb.ca. So I will now open the floor for some questions and stop sharing my screen so I can see what you've all said. Okay, sorry, I was just reading the comments. So interest in boundaries. I think it's important to acknowledge the importance of diverse reactions to stressful events, and also events that can be detrimental to our own health. It's normal to have fear over this pandemic. I'm not agreeing that this is a disorder to worry about an event that could cause you harm. Anxiety is caused most of the time not being able to control what's happening around you. And I feel that reducing it to disorders is stigmatized a response to stressors and the inability to control your own environment. So certainly, like I said, anxiety is a normal response to stressful events. So many individuals will experience anxiety. All of us are experiencing some form of anxiety with this pandemic. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you may experience an anxiety disorder, because as I said, everyone's so individual. And what may be anxiety provoking for one person may be exciting for another person. So no, certainly some people may experience an anxiety disorder. Some people, depending on who they are, may just experience, a natural level of anxiety, or if that makes sense. Are there any questions or anything that people would like to address before we go? I just saw, why are we stigmatized? If we indicate to a person that we're worrying, I feel that people look negatively, make me feel foolish if I say that I'm worried about something. Honestly, worry is a natural experience that a lot of people experience. And worrying is just part of life, part of being human. And I'm sorry that there is still so much stigma in the world about things such as anxiety and things as worry. I think that a lot of us are working hard to get rid of that stigma. And is the stress causing the chemical imbalance, or is it strictly linked to genetics? Oh, that's a very good question. So there's many things that could cause a chemical imbalance. And it's not always strictly related to genetics. There's many different factors at play, and it's very individual to the person. For some people, it may be situational, and there's no chemical imbalance. For some people, it may take medication to balance things out. It's not always necessarily stress or genetics. It could be hormonal changes in your body, or many different possibilities. What do you do when your anxiety has taken over your mind? And I'm sorry to that's something that you experience. I would suggest that that's certainly when you need to reach out and talk to somebody. You know, reaching out to, whether it's addictions and mental health, or if you have coverage, a private counselor, or even doing some of the groups that CMHA has to offer. I think Lisa has an anxiety and panic disorder group coming up. So there are some things out there that you can do, skills that you can learn. Do you have other educational tools for information for caregivers who don't experience that same level of anxiety to continue to better understand those that do in our life? That is a very good question. Lisa, are you aware of anything else that we have that we could offer for educational tools, besides like handouts and this presentation? And
for anxiety, when you're working with someone who does have anxiety, everything you can arm yourself with, like this presentation would have been really good, so that you can have the compassion and the understanding of what someone else is dealing with. Because many times with anxiety, we, the caregiver, take offense, we take it personal, them asking over and over again the same question, for example. It can be exhausting trying to respond to that. What, are you going to be home at 10? What time are you going to be home? What time are you going to be home? What time are you going to be home? What time did you say you were going to be home? Like, it's working with someone with anxiety can be really challenging. So the more you can arm yourself with, like I say, this webinar, we are running, hosting, but it's full. Kaitee mentioned our anxiety and panic disorder, which, speaking of disorder, we're going to remove that word disorder, and we're going to replace it with illness, because it's actually an illness. But yeah, that's my response. Hi, Teresa. That is my response. The more information you can get, the more understanding you can have, and the more you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, the more compassion you'll have for working with someone with anxiety. And you'll be able to recognize that, okay, this is the illness. This is not the annoyance to frustrate me. You know, that kind of thing.
yeah, certainly it's difficult because it takes a lot of compassion and understanding and patience on your part, right, as the caregiver or helper, and just learning more about. We also have our Changing Minds workshop, which goes a little bit more in depth into different anxiety disorders, as well as pretty much all anxiety or all mental illnesses, which we have more information on our website, cmhanb.ca. And that's something that we're hoping that, you know, with us going yellow and whatnot, maybe we can offer in the near future. And I just see.
Sorry, I was going to say, on our YouTube channel, there's 2 different programs, a 4-session program, a 3-session program, information on mindfulness, information on coping tools. All of those are on our YouTube channel, CMHA of NB, which would also be helpful in learning you yourself with anxiety or working with someone with anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And I just see one more question here. What are some tips when advocating for yourself and trying to get help from an insensitive doctor? I'm sorry that's your experience. I know that that can be very difficult. And when it comes to advocating for yourself, sometimes it's a matter of getting loud, unfortunately. And it can be difficult. Sometimes really expressing how dire the situation is, or sometimes it might be a matter of finding some support from elsewhere if you're not getting the support from the person that you're reaching out to. I know that that is really tricky. And what is the best platform for teens to reach out to for help with anxiety? Um, well, there is the kids help phone, and they have a website as well. There's jack.org, which has some really good information as well. There's Bridge the Gap, which has some awesome information. These are all online things because when I think of young folks, I think of, they're tech savvy. And they have that Bridge the Gap for youth as well. Our Bounce Back program that I spoke about at the beginning, that's something that currently is only offered to adults. However, in the near future, it'll be offered to youth as well. And, just different programs that we have going on, like Learning to Cope. Um, and, and I mean, friends, family, and teachers, and guidance counselors. There's also the LINK program, which is out there for some folks in different parts of the province as well, which has different resources for teens and for youth. So I think those are all the questions that I see. I hope that that you got the answer you were looking for. And if not, if you'd like to chat some more, or if there's more information that you're looking for, you could always give me an email. I'm putting my email address in the chat, and I can answer your questions there if you'd like something a little bit more specific. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm really happy that you were able to come and benefit from the webinar, hopefully. And I'm going to close out now so that you can fill out our survey. And I thank you for staying on this long, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.